They hated Maduro. They were cheering in the street when they got rid of him. He lost his last election. He just lost the election and kept power. So it's not like his people wanted him.
United States a few nights ago goes into Venezuela, drops some bombs, and successfully captures Maduro and his wife to bring them back to the Southern District of New York to face crime. So let's start with this. Before we dive deep into the legal aspects of this, what did you think, like, just as a moral or political action here? Is this something that you're in favor of? It's something that you hesitate and something you want to wait and see? What do you think?
Yeah, it's funny because fans of the show will know that Rob and I have been on our best behavior for the past couple episodes, because we used to just yell at each other all the time.
That's
and
right.
This might be the moment where we stop being on our best behavior.
I got it all out, I think, the past two.
Because I was a fan. I was a big fan. Like, look, I understand people are going to say, like, Iraq, weapons of mass destruction. There's precedent. This has gone badly in the past. I understand people's concerns, right? And I'm sensitive to that. I don't want to discount those. But at the end of the day, you have a communist dictator who is poisoning Americans with operations directed at our shore, who's the head of a cartel that's victimizing our people, and FYI, not for nothing, stole billions of dollars of valuable oil resources from our companies. Like, our companies developed the oil in that region. They stole it from us. They just stole it from our companies, and then they squandered it. And they're not generating any oil. Meanwhile, because it's communist, Chinese influence is growing. And if China ever was able to take control of that oil, then they would have a powerful counterbalance to America's dominance on the petrodollar and the oil market, which is the thing that keeps our economy roiling and doing well. That's why we don't have inflation the way we should, with a giant debt that we have. Debt to GDP ratios are garbage, but we have the petrodollar. So I think this was a big political win for America, honestly. Now, could it go badly? Yes, it could go badly. I'm not a mind reader. Don't have a crystal ball. But on a moral, political level, I think this was an enormous win.
Now, I thought the thing that cut our economy going was Somalian daycares. So I was, misunderstood that.
I didn't invest in them. I had all my money in the stock market. I should have had it in Somalian daycares.
The Bitcoiners, the crypto bros thought they had the market cornered. No, it was the Somali daycare owners. They knew it was up. On this issue, though, most of the people on my channel have heard my take on it. I'll just say this. I have problems with this as an act of intervention because I think it's selectively applied, and I think it'll set the standard, as is already been set, that basically just the executive gets to choose who and what to invade at whatever time. You could throw a dart and hit a country where you could accuse them of negatively influencing the United States through interactions with China, through drug running, through cartels, through, natural resources, etc. I think, probably much of the reason you've given here is the truth for why we had intervention in Libya, which I think has been a disaster. I think the strongest evidence suggests that using the dollar as the world reserve currency was something that Libya was no longer interested in, and they were pushing for an African dinar, which is the real reason. And I'm a little nonplussed, I guess we'll say, that the Trump administration is trying to spin this as first and foremost a drug action, which is farcical in that that's fine, you could say this, but then you could point to several other areas that are worse. The real reason, though, that even beyond that I have a problem with this action is that I see this as interrupting a positive news cycle for Trump and another example of being focused more on foreign policy than domestic policy. If this would come in conjunction with all of a sudden we hear like big FBI news next week about 300 more people in Minnesota locked up, connections to NGOs or to Americans, because I think both of us agree on this. A lot of these schemes in Somalia, as we could already see with the one person who's been prosecuted, Amy Buck, it's hard to just come here off the boat and come up with these schemes. There were people in this country that were helping facilitate, I think, a lot of these fraudulent schemes. So if we see a world where domestic issues are being focused on simultaneously, and this ends up not being a quagmire where we end up there 20 years like Afghanistan, yeah, I would say at the end of the day, I don't have huge problems with it. But as a non-interventionist, I have initial problems with it until I see evidence to the contrary. And I think that this signifies a lack of focus on domestic issues. So that's basically where I stand. I will say this, though. I think both of us, and I think everyone, regardless of where you stand on this, should be able to agree with this. I believe that as it stands right now, granted, things could go wrong going forward, but as it stands right now with what we've seen right now, this may be the most remarkably successfully pulled off mission of this caliber that I have ever heard of. I mean, 0 U.S. casualties. I'm not even sure if there's any casualties from Venezuelans. I heard potentially like 1 or 2, but I mean, that's shockingly efficient to be able to have these sort of results. And I think if you compare that to maybe something that we've seen like the Afghanistan withdrawal, which seemed completely bumbling, it does show something, hopefully, to people that question the U.S. military might, that there is a significant competence there that, tread lightly, because these are sort of actions that could be taken on narco states in the future.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think it was a spectacular success as a military operation. That can't even be questioned. And I'm sure that then there'll be some number of casualties in terms of like guards and whatnot. A surprising number of Cubans apparently were there. But of course, given the communist the communist nature of the government, that's unsurprising. But like at the end of the day, this isn't the Middle East, and that's actually the biggest point in favor of this operation going better. Because the thing about intervening in the Middle East is, I think there's been a lot of conversation in this country recently about just like being more realistic about the differences between cultures, right? Like if you're a predominantly Christian nation and you're intervening in the Middle East, you are always going to be the great Satan. There's no other way that could turn out, right? In hindsight, that's obvious. Maybe it wasn't obvious at the time. I don't know, but that's clear now. Intervening in our hemisphere, in our backyard, in a nation that, is it 1-to-1 the same culture as us? Obviously not, but has much more cultural similarities. And I think the big difference is they hated Maduro. They were cheering in the street when they got rid of him. He lost his last election. He just lost the election and kept power. So it's not like his people wanted him, right? Like this is not a situation like the ones we saw in the Middle East. I think it'll play out differently. Now, of course, I take your point. It could go very, very badly. But the only thing, just to be totally honest, and just to be honest with the audience, we're coming at this with different priors also. Like I said in one of our first shows, like I'm actually pretty hawkish by nature. And I like the projection of American power. I like Pax Americana. I like America making sure that other countries I like less don't influence the world to the extent that they would if we weren't doing it. So I'm not, we're going to have a different perspective just because of that, which is, I think, okay. My concern, and I raise it with you because you said it, and I think it's a good concern in terms of domestic politics, is that there's a large portion of Trump's base that is not hawkish at all, not hawkish. And I think he will have to convince them that this isn't a betrayal of his promises to avoid foreign entanglements, right? And I think the proof will be in the pudding. We'll see what happens. Like if a few months from now, things are going better over there, we're not embroiled in some giant controversy and the oil's flowing again, ooh.
I think it'll take more than a couple months to get the oil infrastructure, but your point's well taken. If it ends up not being as, like, let's take another situation I wasn't the biggest fan of, and I'll just call it as it is, the Iranian attack, right, on the nuclear facilities. Now, we may still see blowback from that. There could be potential ramifications that don't show up for years, right? For example, that could drive other foreign countries into relationships, militaristic alliances to challenge the United States and Europe later. Who knows? It could result in terror attacks 6 months, a year down the road in the United States that could be significant. I don't know. But from what we've seen right now, we haven't seen that blowback. If we see a situation like that in Venezuela, I think that it's not going to be that gets massively popular. Like, it's not like this action alone would win the midterms for Republicans. I think it has the chance to be more of a liability. So for me, what it's going to be about is, and this is a cop-out, but this is just the absolute truth. If this doesn't end up as a complete quagmire, it's the economy, stupid. It's like, it's going to be, we're so far out of the election. if 2 months before the election, it turns out the economic numbers are fantastic, people are getting tax breaks, job numbers are through the roof, like, it's just not many people are going to really be hyper-focused on this situation. And many of Trump's base that would be less interventionist like myself, they're going to be willing to overlook this as, well, it's not like his opponent wasn't an interventionist. And if that means that he's securing the border, if he's being more fiscally prudent, then yes, I'm still going to go for that and the Republicans in the midterms over the Democrats. So I don't think by any means, even with his core audience, that this is going to be a deal breaker unless it ends up getting like, you know, tons and tons of U.S. service members end up being killed as a result of this down the road, or that it means that we just completely lack focus on domestic issues. So for me, it's going to be all about that domestic stuff, and we'll see what they accomplish going forward in the next 8 months or so.
I think that's right. And also, obviously, there's multiple rationales. There's a criminal rationale. There's a drug running rationale. There's a cartel rationale. There's an oil rationale, right? And I actually appreciate that this administration has been more honest about the oil rationale. Like, we all figured that out with Iraq down the road, right? Like, we all kind of, even if you didn't know it at the beginning, you knew it by the end. But here's the truth about Venezuela. Our companies built the oil infrastructure to develop the oil in that region. They invested heavily under treaties that guaranteed them fair treatment. And with the exception of one or two companies, that it was expropriated. They just stole it. They literally just stole the investment from our American companies that built this. That we were the ones who were going to develop the oil in the first place. And they stole it, and then, as all communists do, ran it to the ground and starved their people and caused hyper. So it's I think you can be honest about the fact that actually, yeah, look, if we can get this oil flowing, that's very good for American companies.
Well, and
we saw that today. The stock price in the oil sector through the roof. It's very good for American people. And you know what? It's very good for the Venezuelans.
Well, that's the part I was going to say. I don't want to listen, I'm America first, but that doesn't mean I care about my family first. That doesn't mean that I'm just breaking into my neighbor's house and stealing their stuff, right? If it ends up being a mutual deal, if it's like, look, we get access to like a huge source of oil, we're making a profit and they're making a profit, that's different than just we're just going to take it. And I believe that's what's being suggested. Similarly with Trump's deal in Ukraine, right? Like this mineral deal, like the rationale behind that was, look, we've given you an awful lot, so we want something in return. But there's also a benefit to you that if the United States has access to these minerals, it makes an invasion more difficult in the future once we have a peaceful settlement, because now it's not just Russia invading Ukraine that's not in NATO, it's Russia invading territory that the U.S. controls by controlling the mineral rights. Now, all of a sudden, the United States has a clear case to be like, look, we get to defend sort of our resources. So in that sense, again, regardless of what I think of the initial reaction, the potential future deterrence and negotiating position through the success of the mission, and a potential economic policy that will benefit both the people of Venezuela and the people of the United States, I'm hoping that that's what I see.
Yeah. And look, I don't know exactly your position, but I don't remember you being like a big Ukraine guy. But if you were, or anyone in your audience is like it would be great if we could, resolve the situation in Ukraine, whether you're a big Ukraine guy or you just want peace, right? This does two things. One, Russia's economy is an energy-based economy. So what this is threatening is that in a months or years, however long it takes to get this oil going, not only are we sanctioning Russia, we are now capable of just flooding the market and driving down the price of the only thing keeping their economy going. So it's another blow to Russia in that sense. And then in terms of the mineral deal you're talking about, right? Well, what was Zelensky saying? He was like, well, how is that really security? That's not like NATO. How do I know that you'll be there when I need me? Now, Trump can say, hey, remember when those companies stole U.S. interests in Venezuela? Oh, remember when they did that? Look what happened.
Yeah.
Look what happened. So when we say we have a mining interest in Ukraine, if somebody steals it, they're on notice that we take that kind of personally. So, I think it actually does help Trump's position negotiating internationally.
The last thing I'll say before we get to the legal angle is I find it remarkable how you could think of things this way. Like, I was for withdrawing from Afghanistan, and yet the way in which it was done was so poorly implemented. I think it damaged the United States and possibly leads to more necessary military interventions in the future because we're just not respected. Here it's the opposite, something that I'm not a fan of. But if it has to be done, I mean, there's something to be said to being like brutally efficient in the way you do it, and that in itself could end up having more of an anti-interventionist policy. When you're shaking a big stick vigorously, you don't need to use it as much.